Thank you. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Sure. It's Christina Hanley. Hanley is spelled Hanley.
And what do you do for work, ma'am?
I am a forensic scientist at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And how long have you been at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory?
I have been there for approximately 16 years.
Now, ma'am, if I could ask you just a little bit about your educational background, starting with where did you go and what any degree did you receive with regard to your undergraduate?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry with a concentration in Forensics from Merrimack College.
And then after receiving those degrees from Merrimack, where did you go from there?
I began working at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab in 2008.
And from your work there in 2008, what did you do next?
So I began as a chemist 1 in the drug identification unit. Once I completed my training in there, I was promoted to a chemist 2. In 2009, I transferred into the trace unit as a chemist 2, which is the equivalent of a forensic scientist 2 currently. And in 2017, I was promoted to a forensic scientist 3 in the trace arson and explosives unit.
And if you could describe for the jury sort of the difference between a forensic scientist or a chemist 1, forensic scientist 2, forensic scientist 3 within your lab.
Sure. So forensic scientist 2 is considered like a bench analyst working on casework.
Ms. Hanley, I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up really loud, okay?
A forensic scientist 3 is a unit supervisor, and I also perform casework.
And how long is it you've been a forensic scientist 3 or a supervisor within the trace unit?
I have been a supervisor since 2017 for approximately 7 years.
Keep your voice up, please.
Now, Ms. Hanley, with reference to starting in general terms with the trace unit, if you could describe to the jury what is the trace unit and what type of analyses are done within that unit.
Sure. So the type of examination that we do in the trace arson and explosives unit, I examine and compare trace evidence such as paint, fibers, hair, glass, tape, miscellaneous items, and I also do physical match examinations as well as serial number restorations on firearms.
What type of training did you receive at the lab?
So I received in-house training as well as some external training. The in-house training consisted of required readings, exercises, observing other analysts working on casework in the lab. I was required to successfully complete a written exam, a competency test, and a mock trial.
And if you could describe to the jury for what your duties and responsibilities are with your current position at the lab? Sure.
So I'm responsible for the daily operations in the unit, training other new analysts in the unit. I perform technical and administrative reviews of case files. I also work on casework, like I had mentioned, examining trace evidence such as paint, fibers, hairs, glass, tape, miscellaneous items, and physical match examinations and serial number restorations on firearms.
Now, is your lab, the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, is that accredited somehow?
Yes, it is.
And can you describe to the jury what that accreditation means, essentially?
Sure. So an accreditation, it's a formal recognition that the lab is in compliance with certain accreditation requirements.
And is the lab that you work for, is that currently up to code or up to speed with regard to accreditation?
Yes.
Now, as far as you mentioned that you work as a supervisor and review other people's casework, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, when it comes to this specific area, as far as trace analysis or comparison of items, who, if anyone, reviews your work?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
When it comes to this type of analysis, as far as comparison of items, who is it that reviews your work?
So depending on the type of case, currently we do have an external technical reviewer who is authorized to perform that technical review.
And is that external review, is that essentially as a result of there's no one else at the lab that can do what you do?
With some of the disciplines that I perform casework in, I am the only one. So when I do those types of cases, we utilize an external technical reviewer.
Now, are you familiar with a proficiency test?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what that is and how that plays into either your work at the lab or the accreditation process that the lab goes through?
Sure. So a proficiency test monitors an analyst's performance. It's a quality assurance process, and I am required to complete at least one external PT annually. Due to the multiple sub-disciplines in trace, I do typically perform or complete more than one proficiency test per year.
And are the proficiency tests that you take, are they required by the accrediting body, ANAP?
Yes.
And have you passed each of those proficiency tests that you've undertaken over the years?
I have successfully completed my proficiency tests.
Now, turning your attention to this case, at some point did you become involved in an analysis in reference to a lab case number 22-02184?
Yes,
And the name of the suspect on that is Karen Reed, is that correct?
correct.
And if you could describe to the jury, again, just in a general sense, in any sort of case, when items come into your possession at the lab, how is that done, and sort of what do you do with those items when you first receive them?
Sure. So evidence is submitted to the lab through the evidence unit. It's assigned a unique lab number and barcode. The information for the case is input into our LIMS system, which stands for Laboratory Information Management System. And a chain of custody of the items is tracked in that LIMS system. When I take an item into my custody, I then document it with photos and notes. And then I proceed with sampling and microscopic examination and instrumental analysis.
Now, specifically when it comes to, you mentioned you have a variety of sort of subdisciplines or different types of testing or casework that you do, is that correct?
Yes.
Specifically as it applies to an analysis or an examination of items of glass. What, if any, experience or what types of cases would it be that you've looked at those types of items in the past?
So I have examined glass numerous times from a variety of different types of cases. For example, a hit and run or a B&E.
And as far as the types of, are there different types of glass that you've performed examinations on in the past as well? Yes, I mean, there could be a variety of type of glass that I could come across for examination. And with respect to examination of glass, what are some of the steps, or what is the process, or what, if any, instrumentality are you using to conduct your examination?
Sure. So when I examine an item that is glass, I document it with photos and notes, making general observations of appearance, color. I examine a portion microscopically and observe certain optical properties. And then I will also check to see if it fluoresces under UV light. And I also will sample it for analytical analysis using a GRIM, which stands for Glass Refractive Index Measurement.
And if you could explain to the jury the GRIM device, how does that work?
Sure. So it measures the refractive index. Your refractive index. Your sample is placed into an oil of a known refractive index, and that then gets placed onto a hot stage of the microscope of the GRIM instrument. And it goes through a process of cooling and heating, and it looks for the match point temperature. And from that match point temperature, we're able to determine the refractive index of the glass sample.
Now, as far as that determination of the refractive index of a glass sample, how is that? Is that something that you're viewing? And how are you viewing it? What are you viewing it?
It's viewed through the software that the GRIM instrument uses.
And how does that appear as far as visually when you're looking at it?
So it essentially, you watch the cooling and heating process of the sample, like I had mentioned, and it determines the match point temperatures, and it takes an average, and it then calculates the refractive index for the sample.
Now, is there another device that you utilize in the lab called an FTIR?
Yes.
And can you explain, first of all, what that term stands for?
Sure. It stands for Fourier Transform Infrared Spectrometer. Sorry.
And what is that device, and how is that used in your examination?
So it's an analytical technique that's used for certain types of analysis. Basically, your sample is exposed to infrared light, and it reacts in a certain way. And what's produced is what we call a spectrum or a graph, and it's just a series of peaks and valleys that are representative of the sample.
Now, turning your attention back to this case, 22-02184, starting with, were there some glass pieces that you examined in reference to that case?
Yes.
And what were the item numbers associated with the glass pieces that you examined in this case?
Sure. So the item numbers it was item 3-2, 3-3, 7-12, and 7-14.
And if you recall, as far as starting with item 3-2, was there any other sort of label associated with that beyond just item 3-2?
3-2 was a clear, apparent drinking glass.
And item 3-3?
Item 3-3 I believe was the clear apparent glass pieces recovered from the bumper of the vehicle.
And then item 7-12.
That was some clear apparent glass that was recovered. It was recovered from the ground.
The ground at 34 Fairview Road, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And lastly, item 7-14.
7-14 was also a clear apparent piece of glass that was recovered from the road.
Now, with reference to item 3-2, the drinking glass, what, if any, observations did you make or did you note during the course of your examination of that?
Sure. So it appeared to have broken, irregular edges, and that was all I had noted at that point.
Did you take measurements as far as height and width?
I did.
Do you recall what those were?
I would need to refer to my notes for that.
Yes, you can use your notes.
So the diameter of the bottom of the drinking glass was 2 3/4 inches. Approximately 2 3/4 inches, and it measured approximately 2.5 inches in height.
In addition to the measurements that you took, what, if anything else, did you note as far as the interior and the exterior of that glass cup?
That there was some dirt debris material noted on the exterior and interior of that item.
Now, as far as item 3-3, the apparent glass on the rear bumper of the vehicle, what, if any, observations or measurements did you take in reference to that, or how many pieces were there?
Sure. So it consisted of 5 clear pieces of apparent glass, with broken irregular edges. The largest piece measured approximately 7/8 of an inch by 5/16 of an inch, and the smallest piece measured approximately 3/16 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch.
Now, within those 5 pieces in items 3-3, were they then given each of those pieces respectively an additional label or marker?
Yes.
And was that an alphabetical one, essentially A through E?
Yes, I labeled them A through E.
Now, with regard to piece E from item 3-3, what, if anything, in addition, did you do with regard to that piece?
So what I labeled as piece E, I also used the Grimm instrument for analytical instrumentation.
Now, with regard to item 7-12, or the 14 pieces of glass and clear plastic, what, if anything, did you observe in your initial observations or initial examination of those pieces individually?
So in item 7-12, it consisted of 5 pieces of clear apparent plastic and 9 pieces of clear apparent glass, all with broken irregular edges.
Now, specific to the 9 pieces of broken glass, what, if any, examination did you do of them initially?
So the 9 pieces of apparent glass were examined microscopically.
Now, lastly, with regard to item 7-14, the pieces of glass recovered from 34 Fairview Road, what, if anything, did you note during your initial examination of them and observations did you make in regard to that?
Sure. So item 7-14 consisted of 1 clear piece of apparent glass with broken irregular edges.
Now, as far as the microscopic appearance, so when you're putting something under the microscope and you're looking at, what kind of things are you looking for? What kind of characteristics are you looking for when you're examining something microscopically?
So I look at several things. So initially, I look at the color, whether there are like flat, smooth surfaces to the glass, whether it's flat or curvature. And then I may sample some more to examine under a polarized light microscope and check to see if there are certain optical properties under a polarized light microscope that are characteristic of glass.
And in addition to looking at each of these items individually, then what, if any, comparison did you do between those various items 3-2, 3-3, 7-12, and 7-14?
So between those items, I first examined them to see if there was a physical match between item 3-2 and item 7-12 and 7-14. And then I also did a comparison of 3-2 to item 3-3. And then I also compared item 3-3 to to 7-14 for possible physical match. And in addition, I also sampled some pieces for use for examination on the Grimm instrument.
Let me ask you, just as far as classification goes, are you familiar with terms as far as a class characteristic versus an individual characteristic?
Yes.
Can you explain what those terms mean and how they relate to each other within your specific forensic field?
Sure. So a class characteristic is when a material can be associated with a group of items that share characteristics. Like, for example, fibers or tape. An individual characteristic is when a material can be associated with a single source, for example, a physical match.
Now, with reference to your analysis between items 3-2 and 7-12, what, if any, conclusions were you able to draw from your examination or comparison of those items?
Sure. So, right, there are several items that I'll just have to refer to my conclusion, if that's okay, my report.
Yes, you can go ahead and look at your notes.
So item 3-2 was found to have a physical match with 6 of the pieces of clear apparent glass from 7-12. But there was no physical match with the 3 other pieces from 7-12.
Based on that physical match that you've determined, what, if any, conclusions can you come to with regard to those items that were physical?
Sure. So item 3-2 and the 6 pieces from 7-12 were at one time together as one unit. So then item 3-2 and all 9 pieces from item 7-12 were examined microscopically. However, there was no physical match found with the piece of clear glass from 7-14. Item 3-2 and all 9 pieces of clear apparent glass from 7-12 were examined microscopically, but no physical match was found with 2 of the pieces from the clear apparent glass from item 3-3.
Now, with reference to item 3-3 and item 7-14, what, if any, comparison examination were you able to do in reference to that?
Sure. So item 3 so two of the clear glass pieces from 3-3 were examined microscopically. No physical match was found with the piece of clear glass from item 7-14. One of the pieces that I had labeled as piece E from item 3-3 was found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties with examined portions of the piece of clear glass from item 7-14. So accordingly, the examined portion of the piece of clear glass that I labeled as E from item 3-3 could have originated from the examined portion of the piece of clear glass from item 7-14 or from another source with the same characteristics.
Now, Ms. Hanley, you used a term in there as far as instrumental properties. Can you explain to the jury what that term means and how it relates to your examination in this case?
So the instrumental properties, that's referring to the Grimm analysis that I did. So in comparing the refractive index from 3-3 versus 7-14. So
the clear apparent glass from item 3-2 that was recovered from the scene was a physical match for 6 pieces from 7-12, which were additional glass pieces found from the scene, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Sure. So the drinking glass from item 3-2 was a physical match for 6 of the pieces from item 7-12, which was glass recovered from the scene, correct?
Correct.
And then the 2 of the pieces from item 3-3, or one of the pieces, excuse me, piece E from 3-3, which was from the bumper of the defendant's vehicle, was consistent with a piece of clear glass from 7-14, which was found on the ground, correct?
Correct.
Now, Ms. Hanley, in addition to that trace analysis that you performed with regard to the glass pieces, what, if any, other additional examination did you do with regard to items of debris?
Sure. So I also examined item 3-1 and 7-18.18.
Now, starting with item 7-18.18, what, if any, other description did you have as far as what that item was or where it came from?
So 7-18.18 it was scrapings, trace material recovered from the victim's clothing.
And that would be both an orange T-shirt and a gray long sleeve shirt, is that correct?
Correct.
And those particular items, as far as the debris, that was provided to your unit within the lab by whom?
I believe it was Maureen that did the scraping of the clothing and had those scrapings transferred to our unit for further examination.
And that would be Maureen Hartnett, is that correct?
Yes,
And then as far as what, if any, items, the other item was 3-1, is that correct?
correct.
That was the actual sort of taillight housing from the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And according to your notes, who, if anyone, provided that piece of evidence to your unit or to your lab for that comparison purpose?
I would have to double check who, I believe it was Maureen, but I'm not, I would have to double check in my,
Go ahead. You can go ahead. And check.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. It was Trooper Christopher Moore that had that item delivered to the lab.
Now, with reference to item 3-1, the passenger side taillight from the vehicle, what, if any, observations or things did you note in regard to your sort of initial examination of the taillight?
So I did notice that there were portions of the taillight, portions that were clear and red that had broken irregular edges. It appeared to be that there was damage to it.
Now, with reference to your examination just of the taillight now, what, if any, instruments did you utilize in the course of your examination of the taillight?
Sure. So during my examination, a polarized light microscope, a comparison microscope, as well as a FTIR with a microscope attachment, and a microspectrophotometer, also known as a microspec.
Now, the GRIM and the FTIR, I believe you've already discussed in your testimony. As far as the microspec is concerned, can you explain to the jury sort of what that instrument is and how it's used and how you used it in this examination specifically?
Sure. So a microspec is used to examine items that have color. So essentially, your sample is exposed to visible light, reacts in a certain way. Some of the light gets absorbed, some of it gets transmitted. And we get a spectrum, and it's representative of the dye or pigment in the sample.
Now, with reference to item 7-18.18, that being the debris from the victim's clothing, what, if any, observations or measurements did you take in reference to that particular item?
Sure. So I noted that there was some clear plastic material, as well as some red plastic material. And I would have to refer to my report for exact measurements of those items.
You can go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So the piece of clear plastic measured approximately 1/8 of an inch by 1/16 of an inch. And the largest piece of one of the red plastic pieces measured approximately 1/16 of an inch by less than 1/16 of an inch. And the smallest piece from that measured approximately less than 1/16 of an inch by less than 1/16 of an inch.
As far as measurements go, as far as your examination, as far as the lab is concerned, is 1/16 of an inch sort of the bottom row as far as measurements go?
Yes.
So if something is less than that, it's just sort of noted as less than 1/16 of an inch, is that correct?
Yes.
And with regard to that debris, the clear and red plastic from the debris, what, if any, examination or what, if any, instruments did you use to conduct your examination just of those pieces?
So I examined a portion of the clear plastic, as well as one of the pieces of the red plastic. I examined them microscopically, and I analyzed portions instrumentally using an FTIR and a microspec.
And based on those examinations, starting with the clear plastic material that you observed, what, if any, conclusions did you come to with reference to comparison of the clear plastic material to the taillight housing?
So the clear plastic from item 7-18.18 was found to be consistent in color and instrumental properties with the examined portion of the clear plastic from the taillight. So accordingly, the clear plastic from 7-18.18 could have originated from the clear plastic from item 3-1 taillight or from another source with the same characteristics.
Now, similarly, from your examination of the red pieces of plastic in the taillight versus the red pieces of plastic contained within the debris, what, if any, conclusion were you come from your examination of comparison of those items?
Sure. So the examined portions of the red plastic from item 7-18.18 was found to be consistent in color, microscopic appearance, instrumental properties with the examined portions of the red plastic from the taillight item 3-1. So accordingly, the red plastic from 7-18.18 could have originated from the red plastic from item 3-1, the taillight or from another source with the same characteristics.
Thank you. May I have one moment, John?
Yes. I guess I'll take it back.
Your Honor, may I approach the court magistrate with just a minute to get VP for identification?
Which one?
Victor. Thank you. May I inquire? Yes. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Well, almost afternoon, Ms. Hanna.
Good morning. Yeah.
I'd like to show you a document just to begin our conversation this morning, if I may. May I approach?
Yes.
This has been previously identified as VV, as in Victor. And I'd like to ask you, first of all, to take a look at that and tell me if you generally recognize what that document is.
Yes, it appears to be a chain of custody of several items.
Okay, and is that a chain of custody document reflective of the crime lab's case number in this case? Sort of clumsy question. Do you understand what my question is?
It is the chain of custody for 22-02184.
And is that the case number that the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab is still assigned to this case that you're testifying about today?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've seen reports like this before, correct?
Yes,
They're routinely used in the crime lab to track evidence and maintain chain of custody, at least at the crime lab. Is that right?
that's correct.
And the information contained in the report is entered at or near the time of the event that's memorialized.
Yes,
Okay. And it's relied on generally by the crime lab as a business record, correct? As a record of the event memorialized.
yes, it's a record of the chain of custody of items within the lab.
Okay. And my question is it relied on by the lab for truth and accuracy, as best you can maintain it, to track items of evidence within the lab?
Yes, it does track items.
And the information contained in the report is presumed by you and other supervisors at the lab to be accurate. Is that right?
Yes,
Your Honor, I would move forward the admission of VV as an exhibit.
Objection.
We'll see that, we'll see you at sidebar.
May I inquire?
Yes.
Ms. Hanley, I want to draw your attention specifically to the glass pieces that Mr. Lally asked you about. Would you agree that there's a lot of numbers that were discussed, correct?
a lot of,
I compared 3-2 to 7-12, and sub A, B, C, and D of 712 were compared with 3-2 and 3-3. A lot of numbers, right?
yes, there are a lot of numbers, items.
Okay. I want to try, if I can, see how well it goes, to clear that up and categorize those.
Sure.
Perhaps would you agree that we could put the items that you compared and examined in your analysis in 4 categories: 3-2, the cup or the glass; 3-3, the bumper glass; 7-12, the 9 pieces of glass recovered by a trooper named Buchnick at the scene; and 7-14, a single piece of glass recovered by a trooper named Proctor at the scene. Would you agree that those 4 categories are basically what you analyzed between and among each other?
Yes, there's 4 total items.
Okay. And within those items, there were some subcategories of items in some of those, correct?
Yes, because some of the items just had multiple pieces, so they were labeled just to keep track of the pieces.
Okay. So if I could ask you to take those one at a time, pardon me, 3-2, under that column, visually, that would be a single item, just the cup, correct?
Correct.
3-3, under that single item, the bumper, there would be 5 sub-items, A, B, C, and D, and E.
Yes, that's correct.
Public school education. Under 712, the third column, there's 9 pieces, correct? A, B, C, D, E, F as in Frank, I, K, and L are the 9 glass pieces, correct?
Correct.
They're close to being alphabetical, not quite toward the end, right?
Correct. I would have to look at my report for the exact letters, but
Sure, go ahead and look at your report.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
All right, so the last category we were talking about, 7-14, that was a single piece of glass, correct?
that's correct.
First of all, I'm going to ask you to take your comparisons one at a time, if I can. You compared the cup in 3-2 to the 9 pieces recovered at the scene: A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, and L, correct?
Is that 7-12 you're talking about?
7-12. Thank you.
Sorry, can you say the letters again? I just don't know if I heard all of them.
A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, L.
Yes, that's correct.
Of those pieces that I just mentioned, the cup was a match to A, B, C, D, F, and K, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Pieces E and I were compared to each other, and you matched them, correct?
So I believe I'd have to look further in my notes, but I believe E and I were found to fit together by,
Properties, meaning mechanical properties.
yes, but I would have to check my notes, but I believe it was the previous analyst that looked at 7-12 that found the physical match between E and I.
But that wasn't you?
Is it okay if I look at my
Yes.
notes?
Sure, I don't want to get bogged down, but yes, please.
Okay, so item 7-12 was previously examined by another analyst in the trace unit. Specifically, E and I received, when I opened this item for examination, E and I were taped together because they were found to have a physical match by the analyst who previously examined the item.
Great. Importantly, E, I, and L, however, were not found to match the cup in 3-2, correct?
That's correct.
All right. You also compared the cup in 3-2 to the 5 items recovered on the bumper in 3-3, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You also analyzed the cup in 3-2 against the 5 items, A, B, C, D, and E, in 3-3, the bumper glass, correct?
I did examine, I compared item 3-2 to 2 of the pieces marked as A and B from item 3-3,
And those
which
were
was
deemed not to match the cup, correct?
correct.
And you did not analyze C and D, correct? I'm assuming that's because of size.
So the rest of the items were not used for physical match examination due to size and condition.
So as you sit here, none of the items on the bumper were deemed to match the cup, correct?
Correct.
All right. So you did end up analyzing one of the items on the bumper, item E as an echo, and you analyzed that against the single piece of glass found at the scene in 7-14, correct?
Correct.
And you used both, well, you used a variety, it sounds like, of analyses, including microscopy, UV light, the glass refractive index, GRIM process, correct?
That's correct.
You also used the FTIR, is that right? Infrared spectrometry?
That's incorrect.
Okay, you did not use FTIR in this analysis.
I did not.
Okay, but in the analysis that you did use, you found that there was a match between item E on the bumper and the single piece of glass in 714, correct?
They were found to be consistent. They were found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties.
Okay, so importantly, you also compared the single piece of glass in our sort of visual column 4, 714, that single piece of glass, to the cup. You found that it didn't match, correct?
Correct.
All right. So lastly, you tested the single piece of glass found in the fourth column, 714, against the 9 pieces of glass found in 712, A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, and L, correct?
I did compare item 714 to item 3-2 and the 9 pieces in item 7-12.
So another way to put that would be you analyze column 4 against column 3 now, correct?
I examined them for a possible physical match.
And they did not match, correct?
There was no physical match to item 714.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach briefly?
Okay. Want to show Mr. Lowry what you have?
Sure. I'm looking for the one that was already labeled. I don't have it. May I approach the clerk magistrate and ask if he's got WW by chance?
No, I do.
May I borrow that from court? Thank you. I'd like you to take a look at that document. Just glance it over for a second and let me know when you've had an opportunity to study that.
Okay.
You've taken a look at that single page document?
Yes.
Does that appear to accurately reflect, in sort of a visual manner, what you just testified to about your analysis of each of these pieces, irrespective of the text on the item, just the analysis of the items specified in that document?
I'm not quite sure what. I've never seen this before. I'm not quite sure what.
I think you have to move along, Mr. Jackson, for all the reasons we talked about at sidebar.
I understand. My question is a relatively simple one. Is this and if you don't understand something on the document, just say so. Is this a visual representation, an accurate visual representation of what you just testified to in terms of what matched and what didn't match? Where the green matches, the circle with the red through it doesn't match.
I would need to go through my conclusion and compare to confirm.
Fair enough. It is accurate to say, we'll use a cheat sheet for a second. It is accurate to say that the cup was not found to match any items that were found on the bumper. That's correct, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Also, it's fair to say that the piece recovered under 714, the single piece of glass recovered under 714, does not match either the cup, nor does that piece match any of the 9 pieces in 712, correct?
And you can look at your notes if that's easier for you. We just want the right answer, Mr. Jackson, right?
Of course.
So take your time with your notes if that's easier for you.
So I'm sorry. Can you just repeat the last question that you asked for?
The single piece of glass under 714 neither matches the cup, nor does it match any of the 9 pieces found in 712. In other words, it stands alone.
So that's correct. So
Okay.
714, there was no physical match between 714 and 3-2 or any of the pieces in 7-12.
Thank you for that. And then my final question is, the only piece of material, glass material, that was recovered from the bumper, item E, the only thing that any piece on that bumper matched was the single piece of glass found in 714. Correct?
So piece E from item 3-3 was the piece that I examined microscopically and instrumentally. It was found to be consistent in physical and instrumental properties with 7-14.
And that's the only piece of material on that bumper, in that section, in other words, in 3-3, that matched anything else in your analysis. The piece that was found singularly under 714, correct? The only match.
Yes, it was found to be consistent.
Thanks. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Lally?
Briefly, Your Honor. Ms. Hanley, within item 7-12, there were 9 pieces of glass and 5 pieces of plastic, correct?
Correct.
And as far as the comparison analysis that you're conducting is concerned, why is it, as far as the pieces of plastic are concerned, why is that not part of the comparative analysis?
I did not examine the plastic pieces for physical match because there were no other plastic pieces for comparison for physical match. So I examined the glass pieces for possible physical match.
And what are some of the differences between, from an elemental standpoint, as far as plastic versus glass?
Plastic is it's a type of polymer. A different type of analysis would be conducted if I was examining plastic versus glass. Something like a plastic, something that we refer to as anisotropic, or glass is isotropic. So they are different types of material.
Now, as far as characteristically speaking, from plastic and or glass, what are some of the commonalities of those items as they're found in general?
Objection.
Beyond the scope?
Yes.
Sustained.
Now, again, from the drinking glass that was recovered on scene, that was a match for 6 of the pieces of glass that were found on the roadway or on the ground at 34 Fairview Road, correct?
I believe it was 6. I just would have to confirm in my
Go ahead
report.
and you can go ahead and look at your notes.
Yes, it was 6 pieces from 7-12.
And then it was piece E from item 3-3 from the bumper of the defendant's vehicle that was found to be consistent with clear glass that was found on the ground at 34 Fairview Road, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Nothing further.
Anything?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Hanley. You are all set.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Lally.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please state your name and spell your last name for the jury?
Yes, sir. My name is Yuri Bukhanik, spelled Y-U-R-I-Y, last of B-U-K-H-E-N-I-K.
And how are you employed, sir?
I'm employed by the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long have you been a trooper with the state police?
I've been a trooper since 2012.
And what, prior to being employed as a trooper with the state police, excuse me, what, if any, other employment or background do you have as far as law enforcement is concerned?
My law enforcement career began in 2003 when I graduated from the military police school in Fort Leonard, Missouri, while I was enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. From there, I was stationed at Quantico, Virginia, with the Marine Corps Presidential Helicopter Squadron. I provided security for the presidential helicopter and assets, attaining a top-secret Yankee White clearance. I was promoted meritoriously to corporal and sergeant and had a platoon of 44 Marines. From there, I was stationed in Canton, California, where I was a patrol supervisor on base as a military police officer. Once my enlistment ended, I decided to come home and pursue a law enforcement career here in Massachusetts in the communities that I grew up in. I first worked for the VA Hospital Police, where I attained a secret clearance, which was a requirement of the employment. After that, I worked at the Attleboro Police Department in uniform patrol, as well as the SWAT team with the Attleboro, Massachusetts Police Department. In 2011, I applied for the Massachusetts State Police, graduated, and worked at the Sturbridge Barracks, Millbury Barracks, and Foxborough Barracks. In 2015, I was selected to come to the Norfolk District Attorney's Office with the detective unit and worked homicide cases as a trooper. 2021, December, I was promoted and took on a supervisory role within the unit.
Now, with respect to your work within the unit of the detective unit at the Norfolk District Attorney's Office, what, if any, specialized training did you receive in regard to your work there?
I've attended numerous homicide conferences, training in various aspects of digital device analysis and investigations in major crimes, homicides, drug investigations, and so forth.
Now, were you working in that capacity with the State Police Detective Unit on January 29th, 2022?
I was.
And were you on call that day?
I was on call as a supervisor.
Now, can you explain to the jury as far as the on-call system within the detective units? Well, let me ask you this first. What, if any, duties or responsibilities do you have as a sergeant or as a supervisor with reference to on-call duty and sort of how that works?
As a supervisor on call, responsibilities include answering the detective that's on call any questions that might arise. Obviously, we don't all have the same experience, so we put our heads together, and if it's a situation or case, a scene that they have not been exposed to before, they call the supervisor for guidance, suggestion, or bounce questions off of them in order to help them navigate that case.
And who was the on-call detective on this particular date of January 29th?
January 29th, the morning hours up until 7 a.m., it was Trooper Michael Proctor.
And do you know Trooper Proctor?
I do.
And how long have you known Trooper Proctor?
Since he came into the office in 2019, I believe it was September, October 2019.
And have you supervised Trooper Proctor sort of throughout his work within the office?
I have supervised him throughout my supervisory position. So his entire time in the office, while I was a supervisor, I've supervised him directly, yes.
And as far as that on-call system or that on-call rotation is concerned, how is that determined, or how does that sort of come into existence?
The on-call system is formulated, it's compiled the month prior. So, for example, if it was December, beginning of December, the troopers in the office would submit their days requesting not to be on call due to trials, training, personal reasons, or vacations they had planned. Those days are submitted in the beginning of the month, and then if it's in the beginning of December, for example, the on-call schedule for January is then compiled a month in advance, really.
So these are generated well in advance of whatever specific day the trooper is on call, correct?
That's correct.
And as far as the detective unit within the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, who, if anyone, is your supervisor?
Currently, my supervisor is Lieutenant Fanning, and the unit commander is Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully.
And that sort of pecking order, if you will, was that the way that it was set up in January of 2022 as well?
Yes, it was.
Now, on this morning of January 29th, 2022, at some point, do you get a call in the morning, and from whom do you initially get a call?
I received a call approximately 6:44 in the morning or so from the H Troop headquarters, which is the field headquarters for the Metro Boston area, which also covers our county. And they advised me that there was a body in the snowbank in Canton. I asked for further details and advised them that I was not on call, but I would call the on-call trooper and let them know that there was a call-out requesting their assistance. So that's what I did. I called Trooper Proctor and advised them to contact Canton Police.
And following that initial contact that you had from the H Troop and then your call to Trooper Proctor, what happened then?
Trooper Proctor began making phone calls, gathering information.
Sustained. Next question.
What was the next thing that happened as far as your involvement was concerned?
I was advised of the circumstances under which the body was located and what was transpiring. And I told Trooper Proctor that I would start shoveling out during the blizzard and then proceed to meet him in Canton to begin our investigation.
And where was it that you and Trooper Proctor first met up on that particular morning?
We met at the Canton Police Department.
And do you recall approximately what time it was that you arrived at the Canton Police Department?
It was approximately 9:15. Due to the amount of snow that was on the ground, the time that it took me to shovel out the main roads, actually no roads were plowed at the time during my track. So I decided to drive my personal truck to Canton Police Department because it was a four-wheel drive and meet Trooper Proctor there.
Now, as far as your personal truck versus you have a work vehicle as well?
That's correct.
And you mentioned that the truck is four-wheel drive. What is the difference between your personal truck and its capabilities and weather versus the work vehicle?
Well, at the time, there was approximately 10, 15 inches of snow that had accumulated already. My work vehicle is a sedan, low to the ground, low clearance, front-wheel drive. It would not be able to navigate the road conditions at the time. My four-wheel drive vehicle is higher clearance from the roadway and was able to navigate the conditions at the time.
And sir, when you arrived, so at approximately 8:22 in the morning or so, where is it that you were at that point in time, if you know?
At 8:22, I would say I was still blowing the snow out of my driveway, clearing the path for my truck to leave the driveway.
And when you arrived at the Canton Police Station, you mentioned that you met Trooper Proctor there. Do you recall who arrived first?
Trooper Proctor was in the parking lot in his vehicle, and I pulled in, backed in next to his, and we walked in together into the police department, I believe.
And when you walked into the Canton Police Station on that morning, sometime after 9 a.m., where is it that you went? Who, if anyone, did you talk to when you first got there?
We walked into the police department, were guided to the detective department division of the PD, and we met with the detectives from Canton and Sergeant Good, who was the uniform patrol sergeant and having been the first responder to the scene as well.
Now, without reference to anything that was communicated between the two of you, at some point prior to getting to the Canton Police Station, did you have conversations with Trooper Proctor?
Yes, I did.
And did Trooper Proctor make you aware of conversations that he had had with other people prior to getting to the Canton Police Station?
Objection.
No, I'll allow that. It's a yes or no.
Yes.
And so you get to the Canton Police Station, you and Trooper Proctor then proceed to talk to Sergeant Good, is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, without any reference to what was said to you by Sergeant Good, he relayed some information to you as well?
That's correct.
No, I'll allow that.
That's correct.
And if you know about how long was the period of the conversation that you had with Sergeant Good at the Canton Police Station?
The conversation with Sergeant Good was probably 25 to 30 minutes. He walked us through his...
Next question, please, Mr. Lally. I'm going to stop you from answering that, Sergeant.
Yes, Ron.
So, Sergeant Cannick, in reference to, at some point, did you learn the name of the body or the person that was found on the lawn on Fairview Road?
Yes, I did.
Who did you learn him to be?
Mr. John O'Keefe.
And in reference to where Mr. O'Keefe's body was at that point, what, if any, information did you receive about that?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
We learned that Mr. O'Keefe's body was transported to the hospital, Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And in reference to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton, who, if anyone else, were you told had been taken to that facility as well in relation to your response that morning?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
The defendant.
And just to be clear, at some points over the course of your investigation, have you had interactions with Karen Reed?
Yes, I have.
And to be clear, when we say, as far as Karen Reed, the defendant, you see her in the courtroom today.
Yes, I do.
Can you identify just as to where she's seated or an article of clothing that she's wearing?
She's seated between her legal defense team wearing the white blouse.
Your Honor, that's the record reflect identification of the defendant.
Yes.
So upon having that conversation with Sergeant Good at the Canton Police Station, where is it that you and Trooper Proctor went next?
From the Canton Police Department, we proceeded to the McCabe residence.
And that was over on Country Lane, is that correct?
That's correct, number 12, Country Lane.
And when you arrived there, as far as transportation to that, is it you and Trooper Proctor in the same vehicle?
Yes, I made the decision to drive us. That way we only take one vehicle. In addition to Trooper Proctor being able to make phone calls and facilitate other logistics as necessary, allowed him that freedom to do so while I operated the vehicle in the dangerous snow conditions.
And the snow conditions that you were talking about as far as clearing out the driveway, the drive to the Canton Police Station, did those conditions persist throughout the day of the 29th?
Yes, they did.
And so you make your way over to the McCabe residence, again, without anything that was said. Who, if anyone, did you speak with at the McCabe residence that morning?
We first spoke with Miss Jennifer McCabe. We then spoke with Mr. Matt McCabe. And then we spoke with Mr. Brian Albert.
And with reference to each of those conversations, were they done collectively or separately, or how were those interviews conducted?
Each interview was conducted separately. We first interviewed Miss Jennifer McCabe with request of Mr. McCabe to give us privacy. He proceeded upstairs. Once we were done with that interview, Mr. McCabe came downstairs, and Miss McCabe gave us the same courtesy. And once that interview was over, Mr. Brian Albert had arrived, and we interviewed him briefly.
Is that sort of the typical process of how at least your unit conducts interviews with respect to civilians?
Yes, with cooperating civilians, we typically advise them we schedule an interview. We proceed to their location of convenience and separate them and get their version of recollection of events that we are inquiring about.
Now, after you spoke with those three individuals, yourself and Trooper Proctor at the McCabe residence, where is it that you and Trooper Proctor went next?
We proceeded to the Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton.
And where within the Good Samaritan Hospital did you go?
We went to the emergency department.
And within the emergency department, were you led to a specific room?
Yes, we were.
And what, if anything, did you observe when you were in that room?
Once in the room, we observed Mr. O'Keefe's body on the medical bed or gurney, and his clothing, which had been cut off of him, were on the floor at the foot of the bed, a couple of feet away at the foot of the bed.
Now, first, with regard to the clothing, what, if anything, did you do with regard to that?
After viewing Mr. O'Keefe's body, we proceeded to identify the clothing items and bag them into evidence bags, notating which item and a brief description about each item of clothing.
So let me ask you just a little bit about that as far as that process is concerned. So when an item of evidence is collected by you or by your units during the course of an investigation, is there sort of a policy or protocol, or how are things, what do you do with things when you collect them and take them into custody and evidence?
If we deem an item to be of evidentiary value, we identify the item, we take a brief description of it, and we label the evidence bag with that description. We notate who's taking the item into custody, typically who located the item, the time that it's located, and the location from which it was seized or taken or collected.
And with regard to items of clothing, is that something that would be placed in just one big bag of clothes, or like how would those be packaged in evidence bags?
Mr. O'Keefe's clothing, which was already in one big pile on the floor, we packaged all.
Okay, jurors, feel free to stand up and stretch.
And so I'm sorry, Sergeant Buchanan, when you come into the hospital room where Mr. O'Keefe's body was, there's clothing items that are on the floor, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you recall how those clothing items were in relation to each other, in relation to the floor?
They were positioned on the floor in a pile stacked on top of each other, and they were in a condition of being soaking wet.
And with respect to those clothing items, do you recall what those clothing items were individually?
Yes, sir.
And what were they?
They were a plaid pair of boxer underwear. It was a orange-colored design print T-shirt. It was a blue pair of Lucky Brand jeans, a belt, two-tone gray, light, thin hooded sweatshirt, and a right sneaker, black in color with white design and a Nike brand.
And how many sneakers were there contained within that property?
One right sneaker.
And what, if any, observations did you make of the condition beyond them being soaking wet?
I also recognized, due to the aroma and visual observations, traces of vomit on the clothing.
And with regard to those items that you observed on the floor, what, if anything, did you and/or Trooper Proctor do with reference to those clothing items?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Once we went through the clothing, we collected each item and put it into a large evidence bag. We double bagged it due to the wetness of the clothing, so it would not seep through. We also identified the fact that there was only one sneaker. So I requested that Trooper Proctor contact the paramedics that transported Mr. O'Keefe from 34 Fairview to the hospital and have them once again check their ambulance to see if there was another sneaker inadvertently left behind in the ambulance vehicle.
Now, prior to sort of physically touching this or any other piece of evidence, what, if any, other sort of precautions do you take prior to handling, tactile handling any piece of evidence?
Anytime we handle evidence, which obviously we take great caution not to destroy, alter, or discard any evidence, we also put on gloves in order to help preserve that item.
And in reference to these items or items of anything of evidentiary value that you seize as evidence, once you take it and secure it into an evidence bag, what happens to it from there?
Once it's secured in the evidence bag, it is sealed and logged into our evidence storage facility at the office. And then, as necessary, it is signed out, shipped off for processing, review, or court proceedings.
And as far as that sealing is concerned, how are bags or boxes of items of evidentiary value, how are they sealed?
Once the bag is...
I'll allow it. I'll
What?
allow it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Once the bag is sealed, we utilize tape, typically red or yellow tape. Once it's secured, we initial and date the tape on the edge. That procedure helps identify the time and date it was sealed and by who with the initials.
And then once that bag or box is sealed, if that bag or box is subsequently opened at a later time, what, if any, notation or what, if any, recordation of that is made?
Anytime a piece of evidence is signed out for review, it's logged in the tracking system. In addition, anytime a piece of evidence is open, with a container being the bag or box is open and the tape is cut, it is then resealed, reinitialed, and dated by the trooper or an individual who's signing that evidence out and then returning it.
As far as the evidence bag or box is concerned, when it's been opened, is that something that is noticeable based on the sealing and resealing of that particular receptacle?
Yes, sir. It is definitely noticeable, and it's noted in the systems.
Now, with regard to, you mentioned or made some mention earlier in the testimony in regard to evidence storage facilities at your office.
Yes.
Can you describe what those are and who, if anyone, has access to those evidence storage areas?
Within our office, we have 2 troopers that are designated as evidence officers. Those individuals have access to the secure rooms designated strictly for evidence storage. Those rooms are inventoried and kept under not just lock and key, but also digital access control and alarm systems. They are the only ones that have access to those facilities, in addition to our unit commander. But I'll tell you that our unit commander does not access that room without the evidence officers. I myself, even as a supervisor, do not have access to that room.
You don't have access to that evidence room, is that correct?
That's correct.
Trooper Proctor, is he one of those evidence officers? Does he have access to that room?
He does not.
As far as at the time in January of 2022, who were the troopers within your office who did have access to that?
In January 2022, that would be Trooper Jeff Kakowski and Trooper David DeChico.
And that would be in addition to Lieutenant Tully, is that correct?
Detective Lieutenant Tully, I believe, has access to it, but I cannot speak to that. I just believe that he does, as a unit commander, to facilitate any next assignment.
Now, with reference to any items that you were physically present for that were taken into custody or taken into evidence, including that clothing from the hospital on January 29th and any other items throughout the course of this investigation, when they were taped and sealed, what happened with each of those items once they were taken back to your office?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Each item that was sealed, it was processed in, it was logged in, and then it was stored. After processing, it was stored in the evidence room.
Now, returning back to the Good Samaritan Hospital, within that hospital room, you made mention that you secured items and that you made observations of Mr. O'Keefe, is that correct?
That's correct.
And can you describe for the jury, as far as Mr. O'Keefe's body, what were those observations that you made?
Mr. O'Keefe's body was laying on his back. The observations I made were of bruising to the eyelids of his face. Based on my experience and having cases with head trauma, I can tell you that during subdural hematoma,
Yeah, I'll sustain the objection. You can build a foundation if you can, Mr. Lally.
Trooper, over the course of your work with this unit in particular, if you know about how many homicide or let me step into it this way. As far as your work within this unit, as far as it's concerned, what, if any, jurisdiction does the State Police Detective Unit of the District Attorney's Office have with reference to not only homicide but death investigations within Norfolk County?
By statute, Chapter 38, Section 4, each county, the district attorney's office is provided jurisdiction over all death investigations. As a result, the law enforcement entities that are assigned to that Norfolk or that district attorney perform the investigations. In Norfolk County, those individuals are members of the Massachusetts State Police assigned to the State Police Detective Unit within our office.
And so as far as death investigations, what exactly or what type of investigations would that encompass?
Death investigations that we have jurisdiction over are all unattended deaths. Unattended death means that a physician, a doctor, is not overseeing the individual that passes. Those deaths would be suicides, homicides, overdose-type deaths, natural deaths, accidental deaths, and so forth. Any type of death that is not overseen by a doctor at a medical facility or in a hospice-type situation.
So as a result of your assignment to this unit and that sort of exclusivity of jurisdiction over unattended deaths within Norfolk County, if you know approximately how many death investigations have you been a part of over the course of your work with the State Police Detective Unit? Excuse me.
Over the last 9 years, I would venture to say it's over 500 death investigations that I was a part of.
And Sergeant, over the course of your involvement within those investigations, if you know how many of those investigations involved some indication or some type of head trauma? Scores
of investigations that involved some sort of head trauma.
And through the course of your investigations, in those cases that have involved scores of head trauma, have you been privy to information as far as medical findings, autopsy reports, things of that nature in relation to those prior investigations?
Yes, sir, I have been.
Now, with regard to your observations of Mr. O'Keefe, with regard to his eyelids, what if any observations did you make, and what if any, well, let me start just with physical observations. What if any physical observations did you make of Mr. O'Keefe's face and body in general?
His face, I observed the swelling and the discoloration being produced through the blood pooling in the eyelids.
Yep, so just your observation, so the swelling and discoloration. I'll strike the remainder of what you've said.
I also observed a cut to his nostril and an eyelid, which was very small in size, which would have been produced by a...
Objection.
Yeah, so we'll leave it at that. Next question, Mr. Lally.
Based on your training experience, what if any conclusions or what if any opinions that you have in regard to the swelling around the eyes?
Objection.
Yeah, I'll see you at sidebar here.
John?
Yes.
So, Sergeant Mechanic, with reference to your prior death investigations, have you had occasion to make observations of bodies that there was a later determination of some sort of subdural hemorrhage?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Have you made those observations? Have you been part of those investigations?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes.
And what you observed in regard to Mr. O'Keefe, was that consistent or inconsistent with what you had observed on those prior investigations?
Objection.
That I'll allow.
It was consistent.
Now, in addition to the injuries that you observed to Mr. O'Keefe's face, what, if any, injuries did you observe to his extremities?
His extremities produced abrasions to his upper forearm and lower bicep area on his right arm.
And just as you use that term, I'm not asking for any sort of medical definition, but as far as you use that term abrasions, what do you understand that term to be?
I understand that term to be a injury sustained through blunt force trauma or friction to the epidermis of the skin, where a crushing of the vascular system occurs and produces that type of sign on the skin.
And from your observation of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's arm, which arm was this again?
It was his right arm.
And as far as your observation of those injuries to his right arm, what, if any, as far as the consistency of those injuries, what, if anything, did you note or observe in reference to those?
Objection.
Consistency with what? With each?
Let me rephrase it.
Yeah.
How were the abrasions that you're describing positioned in relation to each other?
Each abrasion appeared to me to be linear and concentrated in a specific location on the arm. It didn't go any further north of a point and did not go any further south of a point. So it was concentrated in the elbow, a few inches below the elbow, a few inches above the elbow on the right arm.
Now, while you were at the Good Samaritan Hospital, did you endeavor to speak with Ms. Reed?
We did attempt to, yes.
And was she present at the hospital at that time?
No, she was not.
And at some point subsequent to that, did you receive, or what, if any, information did you receive as to her whereabouts?
We were made aware that she was located at 345 Country Hill Drive in Dayton at her parents' home.
And where did you go from the Good Samaritan Hospital once you left from there?
We proceeded to that location.
Now, sir, with reference to the items of clothing that you recovered from the Good Samaritan of Mr. O'Keefe's, do you have those items of clothing with you here today in court?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would ask that the witness be allowed to retrieve those items and display those items.
Okay, are they in the courtroom?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
How many items are we talking about?
4 Your Honor.
Okay. Jurors, if we go a little past 1, my intention would be to still just take a half-hour lunch today and come back. So I'd rather just go through this if we could.
Sergeant, presenting you with this item, do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
The sweatshirt from the hospital room where Mr. O'Keefe was located.
And, Your Honor, the call to seek to introduce and admit that as the next exhibit.
Okay, any objection, Mr. Jackson?
Sort of need to see what's in the bag before I can object, but I'm
So,
so, done.
okay. All right, so you've received photos of all of this, right? All
I assume what's in the bag is what's been photographed, but until I see it, I won't know.
right, so let's go ahead and open it.
With the court's permission?
Yes.
No objection.
Mr. Lally, why don't you come take the bag?
Yes. Put it back in the bag.
It's another, and we'll put that back in the bag. Okay.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Can you do another item, sir? Do you recognize that item?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize that to be?
It says it's a one orange T-shirt.
And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, if the witness could remove that item and display for the jury as well.
Yes.
No objection.
Okay.
Limit 438.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Another item, sir. Do you recognize that?
Yes, it's the right sneaker recovered from the hospital room.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, if the witness could remove that item from
Yes.
the bag. Display for the jury.
Maybe go through.
Okay.